Good morning and mabuhay! This is Jairah and welcome to my video report on the concepts and strategies in writing conclusion. Before we discuss the concepts and the strategies, let's define conclusion first. So when we say conclusion, it is intended to help the reader understand why your research should matter to them after they have finished reading the paper. A conclusion is not merely a summary of your points or a restatement of your research problem, but a synthesis of your key points. For most essay, a one-developed paragraph is sufficient for a conclusion, although in some cases, a 2 or 3 paragraph conclusion may be required. So now let's tackle the importance of a good conclusion. So a well-written conclusion provides you with several important opportunities to demonstrate your overall understanding of the research problem to the reader. And this includes, first, presenting the last word on the issues you raised on your paper. Just as the introduction, this gives us a first impression to your reader. The conclusion offers a chance to leave a lasting impression. Do this, for example, by highlighting a key points in your analysis or findings. And second is summarizing your thoughts and conveying the larger implication of your study. The conclusion is an opportunity to succinctly answer the so what question by placing the study within the context of past research about the topic you investigated. And third is demonstrating the importance of your ideas. Don't be shy. The conclusion offers you a chance to elaborate the significance of your finding. Fourth and the last, introducing the possible new or expanded ways of thinking about the research problem. Conclusion does not refer to introducing new information which should be avoided, but to offer a new insight and creative approaches for framing or contextualizing the research problem based on the results of your study. Those were the importance of good conclusion. And now, moving on to the structure and writing style. Now is the general rules. When writing the conclusion to your paper, you must follow these general rules. First, state your conclusion in a clear and simple language. Second, do not simply reiterate your results and discussions. And lastly, is indicate the opportunities for future research as long as you haven't already done so in the discussion section of your paper. The function of your paper's conclusion is to restate the main argument. It reminds the reader of the strength of your main arguments and reiterates the most important evidences supporting those arguments. Thus, make sure and however that your conclusion isn't simply a repetitive summary of the findings because this reduces the impact of the arguments you have developed in your essay. Now, you must also consider the following points to ensure your conclusion is appropriate. First, if the arguments or point of your paper is complex, you may need to summarize the argument of your reader. Second, if prior to your conclusion you have not yet explained the significance of your findings, or if you are proceeding inductively, use the end of your paper to describe your main points and explain their significance. Third and the last, move from a detailed to a general level of consideration that returns the topic to the context provided by the introduction or within a new context that emerges from the data. The conclusion also provides a place for you to persuasively and succinctly restate your research problem, given that the reader has now been presented with all the information about the topic. Depending on the discipline you are writing in, the concluding paragraph may contain your reflections on the evidence presented or on the essay's central research problem. However, The nature of being introspective about the research you have done will depend on the topic and whether your instructor wants you to express your observation in this way. Also, in writing conclusion, do not delve into idle speculation. Being introspective means looking within yourself as an author to try and understand an issue more deeply and not to guess at possible outcomes. Now, second, developing a compelling conclusion. Strategies may help you move beyond merely summarizing the key points of your research paper, and this may include any of the following. 1. If your essay deals with a contemporary problem, warn readers of the possible consequences of not attending to the problem. 2. Recommend a specific course or courses of action. And 3. Cite a relevant quotation or expert opinion to lend authority to the conclusion you have reached. A good place to look is research from your literature review. And 4th, restate a key statistic, fact, or visual image to drive home the ultimate point of your paper. Then 5th, if your discipline encourages your personal reflection, illustrate your concluding points within a relevant narrative drawn from your own life experiences. And 6th, return to the anecdote as an example or a quotation that you introduced in your introduction, but add further insight that is derived from the findings of your study. Use your interpretation of results to reframe it in new ways. 7, and the last, provide a take-home message in the form of strong, succinct statement that you want the reader to remember about your study. And now, third is the problems to avoid when writing your conclusion. And this follows, and you should be aware of these things. 1. Failure to concise. The conclusion section should be concise and to the point. Conclusions that are too long often have unnecessary detail. The conclusion section is not the place for the details about your methodology or results, although you should give a summary of what was learned from your research. This summary should be relatively brief, since the emphasis of the conclusion is on the implications, evaluations, insights, and etc. that you are making. Now, the second problem to avoid is the failure to comment on larger or more significant issues. In the introduction, your task was to move from a general or the field of your study to the specific or the research problem. However, in the conclusion, your task is to move from a specific, the research problem, back to the general or your field. For example, how your research contributes new understanding or fills an important gap in the literature. In other words, the conclusion is where you place your research within a larger context. The third problem to avoid is the failure to reveal problems and negative results. Negative aspects of the research should process and should never be ignored. Problems, drawbacks, and challenges encountered during your study should be included as a way of qualifying your overall conclusion. If you encountered negative results, for example, the findings that are validated outside the research context in which you may generate it, you must report them in the results section of your paper. In the conclusion, use the negative results as an opportunity to explain how they provide information on which future research can be based. And fourth is the failure to provide a clear summary of what was learned. In order to be able to discuss how your research fits back into the field of your study, for example, impossibly at the world at large, you need to summarize it briefly and directly. Often, these elements of your conclusions is only a few sentences long. Then fifth problem is the failure to match the objects of your research. Often, research objectives change while the research is being carried out. This is not a problem unless you forget to go back and refine your original objectives in your introduction. As these changes emerge, they must be documented so that they accurately reflect of what you are trying to accomplish in your research, not just from what you thought you might accomplish when you began. And sixth and last, resist the urge to apologize. If you immerse yourself in studying the research problem, you know a good deal about it, perhaps even more than your instructor. Nevertheless, by the time you have finished your writing, you may be having some doubts about what you have produced. Repress these doubts. Don't undermine your authority by saying like, this is just one approach to examining the problem. There may be other, so much better approaches. So those were the concepts and strategies in writing conclusion. I hope to have more video reports with you guys and see you next week.